Thank you, someone. Yes, I'm Tom Yeager, the bard from that famous sector called Montrose in the fine city of Houston in the foolish state of Texas. So I'm applying for dual citizenship with the Fox Valley. I started with membership in the Fox Valley Storytelling Guild. And let me tell you something about this guild. This guild is so ethical regarding recognition and attribution of another artist's contribution. Credit should be given where credit is due, they always say. But blame? Well, they don't say. But same would be my way. But I'll just let you decide on your own which one to bestow upon the octogenarian, avant-gardian, R to X-radian playwright and poetess of my Montrose, Geraldine Pfister, for she was the impetus of today's effort. Now, Jerry is bent to borrow and embellish, and she is always looking for a good story. So she came right down to my guild meet, and she sat right down by my good seat. Then she peered right down at my gross feet, and she barked right out her curse-filled quip. "God damn those dogs," she said. Well, let me tell you this, her brazen bit of familiarity felt a bit indecorous to me, she not offering me first a ladylike salutation. So I growled right back, "Yes, Dame Pfister, they are long, wide, and flat on the bottom, bent, bowed, and buckled by bunions. They're coarse, calloused, plus itching and stinking. But what else would I use under legs for my walking? What's wrong with these here dogs?" Again, she looked down and said, "I think you keep a dog at home." So then I puffed up and said, "Well, your opinion, madam, is in the minority. Everyone else says my darling Sarah remains an incomparable beauty." Next, with pointing, she said, "Well, I suspect a history of chewing going on down there." Vexed rejoinder, and I said, "I simply refuse to elaborate on any of the unproven crimes of my past. But I assure you, ma'am, that these days my arthritic legs are too stove up stiff to ever again pull these toes to my teeth for their nightly nail nibbling." Well, that shut her up. The silence I sought ensued, there being no repair to our repartee. Well, that night I started writing an essay on the underlying theme, but soon befell some bizarre business so closely related that I mounted the two together into this diptych of oral art I call Assessments and Assumptions. And now for you, I'll tell the remainder, just how I do today remember. It's not new, I need you to know, that a number of naughty know-nothings announce their negative notions near their penurious neighbor when I navigate the gnarly nuances of the narrow, not new, sidewalks of my Montrose, when I'm wearing my old comfortable shoes, since so unseemly it seems, some seem their seem. But I'll surely show you, I shan't be shamed by the shape of my shoes now. For I do not apologize for loyalty to my lower leather. Once I'm introduced to shoes whose company I enjoy, we're not easily parted, no matter how worn out I feel. Goodness gracious, to get me to give up galoshes or Gucci's, you got to go get the guile and the grit of the gods of the Greeks. And my, oh my, what a rare reality I'd reap were an obsolete celestial to mess around with this new model mortal. But indeed, what a mighty match it might make, pitting its powers against my principles. The trouble is that people make assessments, assumptions even, based on our appearance, though that rarely serves the larger truth. Of course, we all do it, and I'm not immune. In fact, I argue that our Darwinian processes rely on it. For what would the human species look like if before risking our rigorously rehearsed rites and rituals of randy reproduction, we hadn't made assessments and assumptions of someone's dandy mutation? Seen any mutations you liked recently, anyone? Well, keep looking. But note now, assessments and assumptions can stifle the open mind, leading to stagnant habits of thought. So please, folks, be careful when making your assessments and assumptions, because some people accumulate mysteries not solved by readily available clues. For instance, there are people walking freely in my Montrose today with locked-in narrow ideas who think it inconceivable when the old-timers tell their stories of long ago when I was once indeed a dogged dresser. I had a rack of handsome suits, drawers of beautiful sweaters, but the pride of my closet was my vast collection of fine footwear. I simply had some of the best shoes made in America and in England, back when shoes were actually made, handmade in America and England, not all sweatshops sewn in Singapore or robot built in Bangalore. I had Aldens, I had Cole Haans, I had Allen Edmonds. I was slumming when I stepped out in my Johnson and Murphys. I had Churches, Clarks. No one in Montrose had a better representation of fine quality, classic design gentleman's shoes than I. Now that was decades ago, and truly it pains me so to recall, but the tragic reason for my general fastidious habitude was, sadly, I suffered from a terrible affliction that runs in my family, and not just narcissism. No, it was something far more confining that, once contracted, most people must take to the grave, and an early grave it can bring. I had a few spells as a child, but it wasn't until the year I left school that I came down with a full-blown case of employment. Fortunately, that didn't last long, and my religious regard for my raiment eroded, leaving nothing but an ardent love of old comfortable shoes. Now, the storytelling masters I've studied, mostly Susie, Carolyn, and Anita in this fine guild, well, they're probably all thinking that this self-centered true story is overdue for punching up with a juicy conflict. But my being a social slacker, a consummate keep to myself, or I don't generally engage in personal conflicts to draw from. But I will bristle to the core if accosted by any self-serious so-called authority figure. So for Act 2 of the diptych, I'll reveal a recent run-in I had with one. I rode my bicycle the other day along the beautiful bayou trails north of my Montrose. I rode far and fast and got so parched that I cruised over to the big skateboard park along the bayou for its amenities. So I wheeled right through the outside gate, and I slipped right by the sign in the window, and I rolled right up to the water fountain, and I bent right down for a quench-filled sip. And goddamn, it was good, I say. But out of the corner of my eye, I could see I was being studied by the guard they commissioned after 9/11 to protect our skaters from terrorists, or vice versa if you've seen our Montrose skaters. And my being a magnet for the constabulary, he made a beeline for me. Now, I just kept my head down at the fountain, hiding behind the stream of water until he walked right up, so I was looking right down at his feet. I thought he was going to start some small talk about me not signing in, or maybe about me gliding past that little sign on the gate, that 4 foot by 5 foot little sign that reads "No Bikes!" exclamation point. So I looked up at his 6'4", 280-pound frame, hands on his hips, leaning forward, frowning down at me. And I could just tell he was making assessments and assumptions. Now, y'all don't know me all that well, first time on this stage yet, but so that introduction to this dissertation was your indication that conversations bring me jeopardations. But since my immediate future hung in the balance over what happened next, it seemed prudent that proceedings should start with my greetings. But true to form, what sputtered through my lips was my less than cooperative query. "What's your problem today?" and a sinking feeling fell over me right as I said it. Well, so surprisingly, somewhy, that sentry softened somewhat. He dropped his hands from his hips and raised one to his chin to stroke as he leaned back a little bit and looked me over head to toe, mostly toe, to fine-tune his assessments and assumptions. Well, like a proper copper, following the visual investigation came the verbal interrogation. "Sir," he whined. "Yes," I whimpered. Good cop, bad cop, I couldn't tell. So I braced myself for serious business that was bound to follow. He reared back, cocked his shoulders, took an authoritative breath, looked me square in the eyes, and launched the inquisition. "What size shoe do you wear?" Well, let me tell you this, his brazen bit of familiarity felt a bit indecorous to me. He not offered me first a gentlemanly introduction, but I was cordial this time. "Size 12 wide," I answered, "when Lady Luck leads to their location." Ecstatically, he stated, "That's my size too." Then astoundingly, he extended, "And I've got a new extra pair here in the office today that I'm just going to let you have." Well, suddenly my sinking feeling was eclipsed by his surreal folly. His assessments and assumptions led him to mistake me for homeless. Now, that's not the first time that's happened, I admit, but seldom does my seamed suffering set up such a sudden subsidy from the soft-touch citizenry. So I looked down at my shoes, so sad they seemed, big toe sticking out of a hole, foam poking through the padded tongue, knots in several places up and down the laces, and I felt a pebble poking through a flimsy flapping sole. Conflicted and confused, I pondered my position. But just then a loud rumbling fell from a cloud above, followed by a close-by clap of lightning. Apparently, the champion of this charity was Zeus himself, channeled through the guard, and I didn't relish a run-in with the ranking Olympian. So I said, "My, oh my, what a rare reality I'd reap were my obsolete sneakers to move aside for some new-bought brogans." And indeed, what a mighty match it might make, putting new footgear onto my feet here. And as the Greek god / renegade went into the little shack to get the shoes, I hollered out, "You know, rare is the occasion when anyone from my realm encounters anyone from yours who is so thoughtful and so generous. And I hope you'll always be just as thoughtful and generous to me as you are here today, for I'll need to look you up in the future. In about a decade, I suspect, or more. Just as soon as these good shoes that I already have on finally wear out." And empty-handed, I jumped on my bike and rode home as fast as I could, still wearing my old comfortable shoes that so much do I love, that bold neighbors and friends still make their fun of.